To save our world, I let my father fall. Love bends, duty stands.
The engines roared, tearing through Ignara's crimson sky. Kael Vance's warships sliced across the desert, trailing white smoke under the glare of twin green suns. Red sand shimmered below, vibrating with the ship's raw power. He leaned forward. In the cockpit, sharp blue eyes locked on the display. A new rift had opened, jagged, black, and alive, spitting out ghostly shadows that twisted like living smoke. Kael tilted his head, his left arm buzzing. The cybernetic implant glowed faintly, metal gleaming under the sun's light. "Something's off," he muttered, voice rough and low, echoing in the tight space. He'd seen these shadows before, years ago when an ether blast took his squad. But these were different, thicker, hungrier. He punched the comms button. "Control, this is Captain Vance. Eastern Rift's gone haywire. Shadows are spilling out. I need to report to the Fire Council." Static crackled back through the speaker. "Copy that, Captain. Land at the Ember Tower. They're waiting." Kael killed the comms, gripping the controls tighter. The ship banked, hard, dropping toward a landing pad carved into the red dunes. The hatch hissed open, and a wave of heat slammed into him, thick with the metallic tang of underground ether. He stepped out, boots thudding on the metal deck, his tattered coat flapping in the wind. The cybernetic arm caught the light, a relic of the explosion that spared him, and no one else. The Ember Tower loomed ahead, a monolith suspended by swirling rings of orange ether. Its hum pulsed through the air, low and steady, like a beast breathing beneath the sand. Wind howled past, mixing with the distant screech of the rift, a sound that set his teeth on edge. Kael squared his shoulders. Valtheris had been his home for a decade, ever since Earth fell to ruin. Today, though, it felt alien. A human officer, Lieutenant Dorn, jogged up, boots kicking up red dust. "Captain, what did you see out there?" His voice was sharp, eyes darting nervously. Kael raised his cybernetic arm, the screen flickering to life with footage of the shadows drifting over. "The dunes. Ether's been tampered with. This isn't natural. It's like..." He paused, squinting at a faint symbol on the display. An old Earth sigil, a relic from the colonial wars. Memories hit hard. The blast, the smoke, his squad's screams, fading into silence. He shook it off, jaw tight. Dorn leaned in, brow furrowed. "Like what, sir?" "Not sure yet." Kael switched off the screen, voice hardening. "But I need to see the council, now." Dorn nodded, leading him toward the tower's gate. The stone walls glowed faintly, etched with ancient flame patterns that pulsed like veins. Kael's boots echoed as he walked, his cybernetic arm buzzing louder with every step. The ether in the air pressed against him, thick and restless, whispering secrets he couldn't quite hear. They stopped at the lift. Dorn turned, voice dropping low. "Captain, the Valtherans don't trust us much, especially Veyra. She thinks humans are the root of every mess here." Kael smirked, cold and sharp. "She's not entirely wrong, but I'm not here to grovel." He stepped into the lift, the doors sliding shut with a hiss. The machinery whined as it climbed glass, walls revealing the sprawling red desert below. Shadows still drifted near the rift, silent and eerie. The lift jolted to a stop, doors parting to reveal a glowing hallway lined with ether-lit stone. Kael took a deep breath, hand brushing the pocket where he'd stashed his star chart. That Earth sigil gnawed at him. If it tied back to the explosion that scarred him, someone was playing a deadly game, one he intended to end. His boots clomped down the hall, steady and heavy. Ahead, a towering figure emerged, a Valtheran, skin blazing orange like a living flame. Veyra. He felt her gaze before he saw it, sharp and unyielding, cutting through the haze. Something was coming. He could feel it in his bones and in the hum of his cybernetic arm. The hallway blazed with the orange glow of ether, guiding Kael Vance deeper into the Ember Tower. His boots clomped against the stone floor, the sound bouncing off walls carved with swirling flame patterns. His cybernetic left arm buzzed, metal, gleaming under the pulsing light. The air hummed with ether, thick and scorching, like the breath of something alive and pissed off. Veyra loomed ahead, a towering figure blocking the path. Her orange skin flickered like a living torch, casting shadows that danced across the hall. Her pupilless eyes burned like hot coals, locked on him. She crossed her arms, Valtheran armor glinting under the twin suns' light streaming through high windows. Another human stirring up trouble? Her voice was low, cutting like a blade through desert wind. Kael stopped a few paces back. I'm not here to stir anything. His tone stayed flat, steady. He raised his cybernetic arm, the screen flaring to life with footage of the rift. Shadows are spilling out. Ether's gone rogue. I'm reporting to the council. Thera stepped, closer. So close he caught the sharp, burnt scent rolling off her skin. Rogue? Or because you humans dig too deep? Her glow flared brighter, bathing the hallway in a sea of orange. Ether's the blood of Valtheris. You treat it like a damn toy. Kael's jaw tightened, his blue eyes meeting her fiery stare. Humans need ether to survive, same as you. But I'm not here to bicker. He killed the screen, his cybernetic arm whining faintly. Something's wrong. I can feel it. Before Thera could snap back, a deafening boom rocked the tower. The ground lurched under them. A pillar of orange ether erupted from deep within, tearing through the stone wall like paper. The shriek of unleashed energy pierced the air, sharp and wild. Kael lunged, yanking Thera out of the path of falling debris. A chunk of rock grazed his head, crashing into the floor with a splintering crack. Thera shoved him off, her glowing hands slamming him back. He hit the ground hard. I don't need your help, she roared, scrambling to her feet. Red sand clung to her armor, but her fiery glow burned brighter, unshaken. Kael pushed up, catching his breath. Didn't want to. But if you're dead, who's gonna explain this mess? He stood, brushing dust off his coat. His cybernetic arm buzzed louder, tingling with the ether still crackling in the air. Thera went quiet, her coal-hot eyes boring into him. The rift in the floor hissed, a low, unsteady hum rising from it. Kael crouched, snagging a jagged metal shard from the wreckage. He squinted. An old earth sigil, triangle inside a circle, stared back at him. Memories flashed. The blast that took his squad, the smoke, the silence. He clenched the shard, slipping it into his pocket. This wasn't an accident, he muttered, barely audible. Thera closed the gap, her voice ice-cold. If humans did this, I'll burn you all to ash. She tilted her head, her glow pulsing like a heartbeat. Kael looked up, meeting her gaze head-on. And if it wasn't us? You ready to hear me out? A deep voice cut through the tension, booming from overhead speakers. Captain Vance and Warrior Veyra, report to the flame chamber, now! The words crackled, echoing off the shattered walls. Thera turned on her heel, striding off without a glance back. Move it, human. Don't lag. Her voice was sharp, laced with unease. Kael followed, his cybernetic arm clenched tight. They stepped over rubble, heading for the lift to the flame chamber. The doors slid shut with a hiss, the machinery whining as it rose. Through the glass, the red desert stretched out, shadows still drifting near the rift like ghosts in the wind. He glanced at Thera. What's the council gonna do? She didn't look at him. They'll give orders. I'll follow. You? Her glow flickered, a spark of tension rippling through it. Kael smirked, cold and thin. I'm not big on orders, but I'm damn good at digging up the truth. The lift jolted to a stop, doors parting. The flame chamber sprawled before them, glass floor gleaming, a swirling ether vortex churning below. Its hum rumbled deep like the planet's heartbeat. Kael's cybernetic arm flared hot. He glanced at his pocket, feeling the weight of the hidden shard. Why'd he stash it? He knew why, deep down. If that sigil tied back to his past, someone, Earth or Valtheran, was hiding a lethal secret. Thera stepped out first, her shadow stretching. Across the glass. Kael took a breath, following her. The council waited ahead, their silhouettes glowing against the ether's light. Whatever was coming, he had a gut feeling it'd change everything. The flame chamber glowed with the fierce orange light of ether, its glass floor trembling under Kael Vance's boots. Below, a vortex of energy swirled, its deep hum pulsing like Ignara's heartbeat. His cybernetic arm buzzed faintly, blue eyes, scanning the room with icy precision. Veyra stood beside him, tall and blazing, her orange skin flickering like a dying ember. Blood crusted on her armor, a stark reminder of the chaos they'd left behind. The Fire Council loomed on their raised dais, 5 Valtherans with skin aglow in shades of orange, green, and purple. Elder Korath, at the center, raised a hand. "Captain Vance, Warrior Veyra, the explosion is a warning." His voice rasped like wind over desert dunes, slow and heavy. Kael stepped forward, voice rough. "The shadows at the Eastern Rift aren't natural. Someone's screwing with the ether. I can feel it through this." He lifted his cybernetic arm, metal catching the light. Thera cut in, her voice sharp with fury. "Humans did this. My father trusted you once. He worked on your ether projects and paid with his life." Her glow flared, bathing the chamber in a wave of orange fire. Kael turned, meeting her glare head-on. "I wasn't there when your dad died, but I get loss. My squad burned up in an ether blast. I survived by dumb luck. And this." He tapped. His cybernetic arm, the metal clanging sharply. "It picks up when ether's off, and it's screaming right now." Korath tilted his head, purple eyes glinting. "So you think this wasn't chance?" Kael paused, his hand brushing the pocket where the Earth sigil hid. Not yet. He couldn't tip his hand. "The shadows move with purpose. Someone's pulling strings," he said, voice low but firm. Thera stepped closer, her heat prickling his skin. "Someone? Or your people?" Her voice hissed, sharp as a blade. Korath raised a hand, silencing them. "Enough! The explosion proves a shared enemy. You'll work together. Head to the slums. Ether's being mined off the books. Find the source." Thera spun around, her glow pulsing wildly. "I don't need an outsider. Valtherans can handle this." Kael smirked, cold and thin. "You're a hell of a fighter. I'm a hell of a thinker. Alone, we're toast. Together, we might make it." Korath nodded, his voice dropping low. "It's settled. Go now, before the rift swallows Ignara whole." Thera's coal-hot eyes flared, but she said nothing. She stormed off, her shadow stretching across the glass. Kael followed, his cybernetic arm whining softly. They stepped into the lift, the doors hissing shut. The machinery groaned as it descended, glass walls framing the endless red desert beyond. Inside the tight space, Thera spoke, voice quiet. "My father thought humans could save Valtheris. He built ether rigs with them. Then they let him die. In the blast!" Her fists clenched, her glow flaring then fading. Kael glanced at her, his gaze softening. "I didn't know your dad, but I know what ether costs. My squad screamed as it ripped them apart. I lived because of this." He raised, his cybernetic arm, metal shining. "It saved me. Now it's warning me when ether's wrong." Thera turned, her eyes softening for a split second before hardening again. "If you're telling the truth, prove it. Down in the slums." Kael nodded. "I will. But you've got to trust me. Just a little." The lift jolted to a stop, doors sliding open. Desert wind blasted in, thick with red sand and the scorched scent of ether. They stepped out, ready to head into the slums. Shadows loomed ahead, cast by illegal mining rigs sprawled across the dunes like ink stains. Then it hit, a sharp, high-pitched screech from the ether vortex back in the tower. Kael froze, his cybernetic arm blazing hot. He spun around, staring, up at the structure. The orange light from the vortex dimmed, sucked into a sudden darkness. Thera heard it too. She tilted her head, voice tight. "What the hell was that?" Kael clenched his fist, eyes narrowing. "I don't know. But that's no normal ether sound." They stood there, wind howling past, sand stinging their skin. Something was waking up, and it was closer than they thought. Desert wind howled through the slums, kicking up red sand that stung the air. Kael Vance dropped from the landing pad, boots thudding into soft dirt. Beside him, Veyra moved silently, her orange skin flickering like a smothered flame. Machinery, roared in the distance, a grinding hum mixed with the sharp, burnt reek of ether wafting from the shantytown below the floating city, a maze of torn tents and outlaw rigs. Kael raised his cybernetic arm, the screen glowing faintly. "Data shows ether pooling heavy down here." His voice was rough, blue eyes scanning the shadows. The arm buzzed louder, heating up as he edged closer to a nearby rig. Thera tilted her head, coal-hot eyes flaring. "I can smell it. Valtheris's blood, wrung dry." Her tone was low, simmering with anger. She stepped forward, hands glowing faintly, poised to ignite. They pushed deeper. Black smoke curled up from the rigs, thick and choking. Metal clanged against metal, blending with the hiss of ether forced up from the ground. A massive forge loomed. Ahead, twice Kael's height, its red-hot pipes spitting orange energy into dented tanks. Figures shuffled around it, faces hidden under black rags, working in eerie silence. Kael stopped, his cybernetic arm trembling hard. "Ether's unstable here. Look at those readings." He pointed at the screen, jagged waves spiking wildly. "Someone's pushing it too far." Thera clenched her fists, her glow flaring bright. "Illegal mining. I'll torch this place to the ground." She surged forward, but Kael threw an arm out, blocking her. "Hold up. Burn it now. We lose." "The trail!" His voice cut sharp. He scanned the shadows, eyes narrowing. "We need to find who's behind this." Before Thera could argue, a scream ripped through the air. 3 figures burst from the dark, masked, their visors glowing faintly, gripping ether rods that blazed red. The weapons screeched as they swung, slicing the air like razors. Kael rolled clear of a strike, his cybernetic arm snapping out a small blade. He drove it into one rod, sparks exploding in a shower of light. Thera spun, hands blazing. Orange. Fire coiled from her fingers, snaring the second attacker in a whip of flame. He screamed as it yanked him down, the sound drowned by the crackle of burning flesh. The third lunged at Kael, rod aimed for his skull. Kael ducked, his cybernetic arm jacking into the thug's gear. A sharp buzz sounded, and the rod died in the guy's hand. Kael slammed a boot into his chest, sending him crashing into the forge. Metal groaned on impact, black smoke billowing higher. Thera charged over, her glow lighting up the scene. "Who are they?" she snarled, ripping the mask off the charred attacker. His face was gray, eyes blank. Not Valtheran, not quite human. Either. Kael knelt by the one he'd dropped, inspecting him. No ID markers. But this... He pulled a metal shard from the guy's gear. An old earth sigil, triangle in a circle, stared back at him. His fist tightened, memories of the blast that took his squad flashing hard. Thera eyed the shard, her glow dimming. "Humans. I knew it." Her voice was ice, flat with certainty. Kael stood, jaw set. "It's not that simple. This sigil's from the colonial wars, before my time here." He pocketed the shard, his cybernetic arm whining softly. Something bigger's at play. Thera spun on him, her glow pulsing hot. "Bigger? Or just an excuse?" She jabbed a finger at the forge, its orange streams still spitting. "This is proof you're gutting Valtheris." Kael shook his head. "If it was us, I wouldn't be here chasing answers." He stepped to the forge, running his cybernetic arm over a pipe. The screen flickered, data streaming fast. "Check this out. Ether's laced with something. Not Valtheran tech. Not current Earth either." Thera leaned in, eyes narrowing. "Then what?" Kael killed the screen, voice dropping low. "The Black Flame. Heard whispers about them. A shadow outfit. They're after ether for something bigger than us." A small blast popped from the forge. Black smoke surged, swallowing their sight. Footsteps echoed through the haze, quick, steady, closing in. Kael whipped around, his cybernetic arm heating up fast. "Company?" he said, tension lacing his words. Thera balled her fists, orange fire flaring around her. "Let me handle it." But through the smoke, a larger shape emerged. Not a masked thug, something else, and it was coming fast. Black smoke churned thick in the slums, a choking shroud over the glowing forges. Kael Vance stood amidst the chaos, his cybernetic arm buzzing hard, blue eyes piercing the haze. Footsteps pounded closer, heavy, deliberate. Veyra flanked, Him, blood crusted on her shoulder, orange flames licking around her fists, casting red sand into sharp relief against the dark. "They're more than I figured," Kael said, voice rough. He raised his cybernetic arm, the screen flickering with 3 hulking shapes closing in, taller, warped, not like the masked grunts from before. Thera tilted her head, coal-hot eyes flaring. "Not Valtheran, not human." Her tone was low, wary. She swung a hand, orange fire slashing through the smoke, clearing a path. The biggest shape stepped forward, nearly 10 feet tall. Its gray skin shimmered faintly, like tainted ether, eyes blank and milky white. One arm gripped a massive ether rod, twice the size of the other's glowing red-hot. The weapon screeched as it moved, a sound like metal tearing apart. Kael backpedaled, his cybernetic arm snapping out a blade. "The black flame's not just using people." He lunged, slashing at the rod. Sparks flew, but the thing shoved him, back with a single brutal swing. He hit the ground hard, air knocked from his lungs. Thera roared, flames erupting from her hands. Orange fire coiled around the giant, dragging it down with a guttural bellow that shook the dirt. She yanked hard, but 2 more shapes charged from the sides. One jabbed its rod into her shoulder. Bright orange blood sprayed, sizzling as it hit the ground, mixing with her glow. "Thera!" Kael shouted, rolling to his feet. He sprinted over, jacking his cybernetic arm into the second attacker's rod. A sharp buzz cut the air, and the weapon died. He slammed a fist into its face, felt like punching stone. The thing's head jerked, but it didn't fall. Thera gritted her teeth. Fire, surging around her. She unleashed a blast, torching the one that stabbed her. Its screams drowned in the crackle of burning flesh. She stumbled, clutching her shoulder, orange blood seeping through her fingers, glowing like molten rock. Kael rushed in, steadying her. "You good?" His voice was tight, cybernetic arm flaring hot where it brushed her. Thera shoved him off, eyes dimming. "Hands off." She straightened, flames flickering weaker. "What are these things?" Kael scanned the charred corpse with his arm. The screen blinked. Hybrid biosigns, ether altered. Lab-grown freaks, the black flames experimenting. He glanced at the giant, still standing, rod raised high. Thera steadied herself, flames sparking back. "Experimenting? For what?" Her voice trembled with rage. Kael's jaw tightened, eyes darkening. "Rumors say they want to widen the rift. Bring back the void. Ultimate power, they call it." He hacked into a nearby forge's controls, triggering a small blast. Smoke billowed, cloaking the giant mid-strike. Thera squared her shoulders, fire flaring brighter. "The void? The bastard that ripped Valtheris apart?" Her tone was ice-cold, edged with disbelief. Kael nodded. "If it's true, they're not just wrecking stuff, they're rewriting it." He scanned the smoke, thicker now. "But I'm betting the Council knows more than they're letting on." Too calm about that explosion, Thera whirled on him, flames surging. "What are you saying? The Council's in on it?" Her glow lit up her face, fury etched deep. Kael shook his head. "Not sure, but someone in that tower's holding cards close. I'll find out." He swept his cybernetic arm around. "They're pulling back. Probably don't want us IDing them." Thera panted, orange blood dripping from her shoulder. "If the Council's dirty, I'll burn that tower to ash." Her voice dropped, low and deadly. Kael met her gaze, softening for a beat. "First, we survive. Then we hunt the black flame." A sharp screech cut through the air, high-pitched, chilling, not ether or metal. Kael spun, his cybernetic arm blazing, hot. "Something else is coming," he said, tension coiling in his gut. Thera clenched her fists, flames roaring back to life. "Bring it on!" But through the smoke, a low laugh rumbled, cold, familiar, too damn familiar. The black smoke thinned out in the slums, leaving the sharp sting of burnt ether hanging heavy. Kael Vance stood among the wreckage, his cybernetic arm buzzing faintly, blue eyes slicing through the fading haze. That low, chilling laugh echoed, again, cold, familiar, and wrong. Veyra braced beside him, orange blood crusted on her shoulder, flames around her fists, flickering like a candle in the wind. "We're being watched," Kael said, voice rough. He raised his cybernetic arm, the screen flickering with a large shape moving slow through the smoke. Thera squared her shoulders, fire sparking brighter. "Let me burn it out." Her tone was tight, determined. She stepped forward, her glow flaring, painting the nearby forge in a wash of orange light. The shape stopped. A voice cut through, deep and clear. "Thera, still got that temper, huh?" The words froze her in place, flames trembling before dimming fast. Kael glanced over, brow tightening. "Someone you know?" He lowered his arm, but the blade stayed ready. Thera's hands shook, coal-hot eyes widening. "No way." Her voice cracked, barely a whisper. She stumbled back, clutching her shoulder. The figure emerged from the smoke, tall, blazing like a Valtheran, but his glow was darker, a deep blood red. His face sharpened under the forge's light. "Dad?" The man chuckled, purple eyes glinting with a twisted edge. "You've grown up fast, Thera." His voice dripped with mockery. "Thought you'd forgotten me." Kael slid in front of her, blocking the path. "Your dad?" "The council said he died in an ether blast." He scanned the guy with his cybernetic arm. The screen blinked. Hybrid, ether twisted. Thera shook her head, fire surging back. "No, you're not him!" She lunged, whipping out a rope of orange flame. It coiled around him, but he laughed louder, shattering it with a burst of blood red. "Ether!" "I'm Veyra," he said, voice cold as steel. "Your father, reborn by the black flame." He stepped closer, his red glow casting a sickly hue over his gray face. "Ether didn't kill me. It made me stronger." Kael's fist tightened, eyes narrowing. "The black flame did this to you." He turned to Thera. "You okay?" Thera sank to her knees, her glow fading. "Dad, you let me think you were dead. Why?" Her voice broke, orange blood trickling through her fingers. Vorak tilted his head. "Because Valtheris is weak. The council fears the void. I don't." He gestured to the sky, where the eastern rift pulsed. "The black flame will use it to fix the past." Kael stepped up, voice hard. "Fix it by breaking everything? I know who's pulling your strings." He flicked his cybernetic screen on, showing an old image. Colonel Harren, his old CO from the blast that scarred him. "Harren! He sold me out. Now he's using you." Vorak's laugh boomed, rattling the forge behind him. "Harren's an old friend. He sees the void's power. Humans and Valtherans will kneel to it." He raised a hand, blood-red ether flaring. "Thera, join me! We're family!" Thera staggered up, flames roaring back to life. "You're no family! You're a monster!" She hurled a blast of orange fire, but Vorak vanished into the smoke, his laugh lingering like a ghost. Kael grabbed her arm, his cybernetic buzzing hot. "He's gone, but not far." He met her eyes, softening. "You holding up?" Thera panted, her glow dimming. "I thought he died protecting me. Now he's alive to destroy it all." Her flames sputtered out, leaving darkness in their wake. Kael clenched his jaw, Harren's betrayal burning fresh in his mind. "Harren stabbed me in the back during that blast. Now he's got your dad. We'll stop them." He scanned the smoke. "But they're tougher than I thought." A sharp screech sliced the air, high, cold, not ether or metal. Kael's cybernetic arm flared, the screen glitching. "Something bigger's coming," he said, gut tightening. Thera straightened, coal-hot eyes blazing. "Whatever it is, I'll turn it to ash." But from the dark, a deep growl rumbled. Low, heavy, and closing, in fast. A low growl shook the slums, rattling the ground underfoot. Kael Vance stood firm amid the black smoke, his cybernetic arm buzzing hard, blue eyes cutting through the dark. Veyra braced beside him, orange blood dripping from her shoulder. Flames around her fists flickering weak. The forges behind them spat red-hot ether, lighting up warped shadows closing in fast. "It's their machine," Kael said, voice rough. He raised his cybernetic arm, the screen glowing with a massive structure, 3 times the size of the forges, its blood-red pipes twisting like veins. "They fired it up." Thera tilted her head, coal-hot eyes flaring. "For what?" Her tone was tight, flames surging around her. She stepped forward, her glow slashing through the smoke. Kael pointed skyward. The eastern rift stretched wider, black and jagged, vomiting shadows thicker than ever. To bring back the void, they're chasing its power. He spun back, cybernetic blade snapping out. "We've got to shut it down!" Before Thera could reply, a blast tore through the air. The machine shuddered, its pipes spewing blood-red ether in wild arcs. Shadows poured down from the rift, writhing like smoke with teeth, milky eyes glowing. Their screeches sliced the air, sharp as shattered glass. Kael dove aside as one lunged, slashing with his blade. It dissolved into mist, but more swarmed in. Thera swung her arms, orange fire erupting into a blazing wall. 3 shadows burned up, their screams swallowed by the crackle of flames. She stumbled, blood dripping faster, voice ragged. "Too many!" Kael darted over, steadying her. "You can't take them solo." He scanned the machine with his arm. Screen flashing. Unstable ether core at the center. "I've got a plan. Buy me time." Thera shoved him off, glow flaring bright. "I'll give you your damn time," she charged, flames roaring, torching a cluster of shadows. Their shrieks echoed, blending with the machine's deep hum. Kael dropped to a knee, jacking his cybernetic arm into the pipe system. "Humans don't just break things," he muttered, voice hard. "We fix them." Data streamed fast on his screen as he rerouted the core through his implant. A blue pulse shot from his arm, linking to the machine. The rig shook, a high whine cutting through the chaos. Kael stood, arm blazing hot. "I've built an amplifier. It'll tame the ether. But I need you." He locked eyes with Thera, urgency burning in his gaze. Thera incinerated the last shadow in her path, staggering back, breathless. "How?" Her voice rasped, orange blood staining her armor. Kael pointed at the glowing red core. "Pour your energy in there. I'll stabilize it." He raised his arm, blue light coiling around the core. "Together, we can close the rift." Thera nodded, flames surging bright. "Screw this up, I'll roast you first." She stepped up, lifting her hands. Orange fire streamed out, merging with Kael's blue pulse. The machine bucked hard, its roar drowning out everything. The shadows froze, dissolving mid-air. The rift shrank, edges pulling tight, but it didn't seal. A Valtheran squad dropped in from the floating city, led by Rykar, his green skin glinting under the suns. "Thera! We're here!" he bellowed, gripping a glowing ether rod. Thera spun, eyes blazing. "Guard the perimeter! Keep those bastards off us!" She barked the order, fire pouring harder into the core. Rykar nodded, leading his team into the straggling shadows. Flames and metal clashed, screams ripping through the slums. Kael gritted his teeth, arm burning like hell. "Hold it, Thera! Almost there!" Sweat streaked his face, voice straining. The machine screeched, the core flaring blinding red. A massive pulse shot skyward, slamming into the rift. Shadows melted away, their cries fading to nothing. The rift tightened, shrinking fast. Thera wavered, flames dimming. "I can't keep this up," she gasped, blood pooling under her feet. Kael grabbed her arm, eyes fierce. "You have to, for Valtheris, for your dad." He pumped more blue energy into the core, the light flaring brighter. A final boom erupted from the machine. Black smoke exploded outward, swallowing the slums whole. Kael and Thera stood locked together, waiting as the haze thickened. Then, through the smoke, a voice rumbled, low, cold, and smug. "You're too late." Vorak emerged, his blood-red glow cutting through the dark. He laughed, loud and cruel, as the rift trembled, edges quivering like a wound about to tear open again. Black smoke billowed from the ether machine, cloaking the slums in a suffocating veil. Kael Vance gripped Veyra's hand, his cybernetic arm burning hot, blue eyes locked on the haze. Thera's orange flames flickered weak, blood streaking, her armor in glowing rivulets. The machine shuddered, its red core pulsing like a dying star. A high-pitched whine cut through the air, drowning out the chaos. Vorak stepped from the smoke, his blood-red glow slicing through the dark. "You're too late," he sneered, voice cold and heavy. He raised a hand, red ether flaring, linking. to the machine's core. The eastern rift quaked, stretching wider, shadows spilling out like a flood. Thera staggered forward, coal-hot eyes blazing. "Dad! Stop this!" she roared, orange fire surging around her. She lunged, a whip of flame lashing out, but Vorak laughed, shattering it with a flick of red energy. "You don't get it, Thera," Vorak growled. "The void will rebuild Valtheris. Stronger, no more sacrifices." He advanced, his red glow smothering her fire. Kael yanked Thera back, blue light pulsing from his cybernetic arm into the core. "He's wrong. The void just destroys." His voice strained, sweat beading on his brow. "Thera, we've got to close the rift. Now!" Thera turned, pain clouding her eyes. "But he's my dad!" Her voice cracked, orange blood dripping. To the dirt, glowing bright. Kael squeezed her hand, gaze fierce. "Your dad made his call. You've got to make yours. Valtheris or the void." He poured more blue energy into the core, merging it with her fading flames. The machine bucked hard, its roar splitting the air. Thera gritted her teeth, fire flaring bright. "I choose Valtheris." She thrust her hands forward, dumping every ounce of energy into the core. Orange and blue light twisted together, shooting. Skyward, slamming into the rift. Shadows dissolved, their screeches fading fast. Vorak charged, red ether forming a jagged blade. "Thera, don't!" he bellowed, swinging at her. Kael shoved her clear. The blade grazed his cybernetic arm, sparks flying as metal screamed. Thera scrambled up, flames roaring back. "Dad, I forgive you, but not this." She hurled a blast of orange fire, melting his blade to slag. Vorak snarled, but shadows from the rift surged down, dragging him into the dark. His scream vanished, swallowed by the void. Kael dropped to a knee, arm blazing. "Thera, the core's gonna blow!" he shouted, pumping blue energy into the rig. The core flared blinding red, shaking like it'd rip apart. A final pulse shot up, and the rift shrank tight, sealing shut. Thera stumbled over, grabbing his hand. "Together!" she rasped, voice raw. Her orange fire fused with his blue light, and the core exploded in a deafening boom. Black smoke erupted, blanketing everything. When the haze cleared, the rift was gone, almost. A tiny crack lingered in the sky. Kael and Thera collapsed in the dirt, hands still locked. A strange heat coursed through him, not from his arm. He stared at Thera, eyes wide. "You feel that?" Thera panted, coal-hot eyes dimming. "I see Earth, your squad, the pain." Her voice trembled, blood finally clotting on her armor. Kael frowned, her memories hitting him. Vorak laughing under twin suns, then the blast that took him. "I see your dad. You're hurt." He let go, but the connection lingered. "What the hell happened?" Thera sat up, glow faint. "The ether? It's tied us together." Her voice was soft, awed. Kael eyed his cybernetic arm, metal pulsing then dimming. "Didn't just save Valtheris. Changed us." He hauled himself up, staring at the rift's crack. A small shadow drifted out, silent and strange. Thera clenched, her fists, eyes flaring. "What's left in there?" Kael turned, voice steady. "No clue, but it's not over." From the distance, a low growl rumbled, fainter now but closer than ever. Red sand settled over the slums, the air thick with the acrid bite of burnt ether. Kael Vance slumped on the machine's wreckage, his cybernetic arm buzzing faint, blue eyes fixed on the tiny crack in the eastern rift. Veyra sat beside him. Orange blood dried into streaks on her armor, her glow flickering like a spent ember. A low growl rumbled from the distance, soft but closer than before. Kael raised his cybernetic arm, screen barely glowing. "This link, I'm still in your head." His voice was rough, edged with unease. He felt Thera's memories, her dad's smile under twin suns, then the blast that stole him away. Thera turned, coal-hot eyes dimming. "And I'm in yours, your squad, the smoke, the screams." Her tone trembled, hands clenching as faint. Flames sparked, then died. "What did the ether do to us?" Kael stood, arm flaring hot when he brushed her. "Didn't just save Valtheris, it fused us." He stared at his metal hand, its glow pulsing, then fading. I feel your pain. You feel mine. Thera rose, glow steadying. Power or curse? Her voice cut sharp, eyes sweeping the slums. Rykar's Valtheran squad worked nearby, clearing out stray shadows, their green and purple skins glinting under the suns. Kael frowned, glancing at the rift. Maybe both, but we survived. That's what counts. He stepped forward, boots crunching sand. Machines toast, rifts sealed. The voids locked out, for now. Thera followed, glow dimming. For now, my dad, he said the void would rebuild. Everything. Her voice faltered, Vorax madness seeping through the link. His blind faith in power. Kael turned, softening. He was wrong. The void doesn't rebuild. It tears apart. I've seen the old Earth logs. He flicked his screen, on, showing a grainy rift from centuries past. But the black flame's not done. Harren's still out there. Thera balled her fists, flames flaring. Harren, the bastard who betrayed you. He used my dad. Her voice hissed, raw with fury. I'll find him. Burn him to nothing. Kael nodded, eyes hard. Together. But we need a breather. This link, it's heavier than I thought. Her pain stabbed through him, a dull ache in his chest. Thera met his gaze, a faint smirk tugging her lips. You're tired too? Thought humans didn't admit weakness. Her tone teased, but her flames softened. Kael's smirk matched hers, cold and thin. We're good at faking it. Doesn't mean we don't feel. He sank back against the wreckage, nodding toward Rykar's crew. They've got this. Rest up. Thera sat beside him, glow painting her dust-streaked face. I don't trust anyone anymore. The Council's hiding something. My dad was alive and I didn't know. Her voice dropped, thick with doubt. Kael dipped his head. I'm with you. Korath was too cool about that explosion. Maybe they knew about the black flame. He glanced up, twin suns blazing green. But now we've got each other. This link's an edge. Thera's coal-hot eyes flared. An edge, or a weight. She felt Kael's scars, Earth's ruins, his squad's deaths, like a reopened wound. Kael went quiet, his cybernetic arm whining soft. Both, but I'm used to carrying weight. He stood, staring at the rift's crack. A small shadow drifted out, silent and eerie. Thera rose, flames sparking. What's in there? Her voice tightened, fists glowing brighter. Kael scanned it with his arm, screen glitching. Can't tell, but it's not like the others. He turned, eyes sharp. Something's alive in that rift. A shrill screech pierced the air from the crack, high, cold, not ether or metal. Kael and Thera locked eyes, his cybernetic glow, and her flames flaring in sync. From the haze, a bigger shadow emerged. It stared right at them. Twin green suns burned down on the slums, scattering the last wisps of black smoke. Kael Vance stood atop the wreckage, his cybernetic arm buzzing faint, blue eyes locked on the tiny crack in the eastern rift. Veyra flanked him, her orange, glow steady now, dried blood crusting her armor in jagged lines. Desert wind howled past, whipping up red sand that sparkled like shattered glass. Kael raised his cybernetic arm, screen flickering weakly. Rifts stable, for now. His voice was rough, but his gaze softened as it hit Thera. We pulled. It off, Thera turned, coal-hot eyes blazing. Pulled it off? At what cost? Her tone was low, laced with doubt. She felt Kael's memories through the ether link, Earth's ruins, his squad lost to smoke and screams. I'm stuck in your head. You're stuck in mine. Kael nodded, arm tingling as Thera's past flooded in. Her dad's grin under twin suns, then the blast that ripped him away. Didn't ask for this link, but it saved us. He stepped forward, boots crunching sand. And Valtheris. Thera scanned the slums, her glow painting Rykar's Valtheran crew in orange light as they cleared debris and shadows. Valtheris is breathing, but the black flame's still out there. Harren's still out there. Her voice sharpened, flames flaring, then settling. Kael's brow tightened, arm whining soft. Harren'll come back, but this time we're ready. He flicked his screen on, showing the ether amplifier he'd rigged from the machine. This tech works. The Council could use it. Cut ether dependence, save lives. Thera tilted her head, a faint smirk tugging her lips. Humans and their gadgets. You keep surprising me. Her tone teased, but her glow steadied, a quiet nod of respect. Boots thudded closer. Rykard jogged up, green skin glinting under the suns. Thera! Captain Vance! Council sent a ship. They want you both. His voice boomed, ether rod glowing. In his grip, Kael spun, eyes narrowing. They know we won, but I still don't trust Korath. He glanced at Thera. What's your take? Thera clenched her fists, glow pulsing. Korath's hiding something about my dad. I'll drag the truth out of him. Her voice was steel, unyielding. A Valtheran ship touched down, hatch hissing open. A purple-skinned warrior stepped out, voice deep. The Fire Council calls. Get on, now. Kael and Thera climbed aboard, the lift whining as it sealed them in. Through the glass, the slums shrank below, red desert sprawling under the twin suns' glare. Kael sank into a seat, arm flaring as Thera's pain hit again, her dad's loss, her trust shattered. You holding up? He asked, voice low. Thera sat beside him, glow lighting her dust-caked face. I'm not okay, but I've got to be strong. She met his eyes, coal-hot gaze steady. You? I feel your loneliness, Earth. It haunts you. Kael's smirk flickered, cold and thin. Earth's the past. Valtheris is home now. He tilted his head, arm buzzing. But this link, it drags it all back. I hate revisiting. Thera nodded, glow softening. I don't like seeing my dad through your eyes either, but it gives me something. He was good once, before the black flame twisted him. Her voice wavered, thick with feeling. Kael's gaze warmed just a fraction. We don't pick our pasts. We pick what's next. This link's power, Thera. If we play it right. Thera went quiet, flames flaring bright, then steadying. Together? Her voice was soft but firm. Kael dipped his head. Together. Her hope bled through the link, a small spark lighting him up inside. The ship jolted down at the Ember Tower. Hatch sliding open. Korath stood waiting, purple skin glowing under the ether's hum. You saved Ignara, he said, voice rolling like desert wind. But the black flame's not beaten. The rift still lives. Kael stepped out, arm clenched tight. We know, but we've got new tech. Will the Council use it? Korath's purple eyes glinted. We'll consider it. First, let's talk about your link. Thera advanced, glow surging. What is this? Link? And what did you hide about my dad? Korath froze, eyes darkening. From the distance, a shrill screech echoed from the rift. A larger shadow drifted out, staring straight at the tower. The Ember Tower hummed faintly under the twin green sun's glare. Kael Vance stood in the flame chamber, his cybernetic arm buzzing soft, blue eyes peering through the glass floor at the swirling ether vortex below. Veyra stood beside him, her orange glow steady, casting shadows on walls carved with ancient flame runes. A shrill screech from the eastern rift echoed in, sharp and cold. Korath turned, purple skin blazing under the ether's light. Your link's an ether byproduct, he said, voice deep as desert wind. Powerful, dangerous. Kael raised his cybernetic arm, screen flickering. Dangerous or not, it saved Ignara. His tone was rough, eyes sharp. My amplifier works. The Council should roll with it. Thera stepped up, glow flaring. Answer me first. What'd you know about my dad? Her voice cut hard, edged with suspicion. Kael's pain, his squad lost to smoke, stabbed through the link, a dull ache in her chest. Korath paused, purple eyes dimming. Vorak chose the black flame. I couldn't stop him. His tone sank, heavy with regret. The Council didn't know he lived, not till now. Thera's fists clenched, flames surging. Didn't know, or didn't care? Her glow flooded the chamber in orange fire, voice hissing with fury. Kael's hand settled on her shoulder, gaze softening. Thera, cool it. We need them. He faced Korath. The black flames got Heron. He'll hit back. This tech can stop him. Korath nodded, eyes glinting. The council will review it, but the rift's still shaky. That shadow... He pointed through the glass wall. A hulking shape drifted from the crack. Tall, warped, milky eyes staring at the tower. Kael scanned it with his arm, screen glitching. It's not like the others. Something's alive in there. His voice tightened, arm flaring hot. Thera spun, coal-hot eyes blazing. Alive? You mean the void? Her tone dropped, stunned. Kael's fear, Earth's dark past, bled through the link, cold and heavy. Kael shook his head. Not sure, but it's not natural. He killed the screen, jaw set. We beat the black flame once. We can do it again. Thera nodded, flames steadying. We lit a path, but the dark's still out there. Her voice was firm, glow softening, like a vow. Kael pulled his star chart from his coat, sketching a new star with an old pen. Earth taught me this. Every fight's a step forward. He glanced at her, smirk cold but real. You taught me fire's not just for breaking stuff. Thera eyed the chart, softening. And you showed me humans don't just take. His hope flickered through the link, a faint light in her dark. Together we're tougher. Korath stepped closer, voice rumbling. You're a symbol now, Valtheran and human, united. But the fight's not over. He gestured outside, where the shadow loomed larger. Its screech sharpened, slicing the air. Kael straightened, arm clenched. If the void comes back, we'll face it. He met Thera's gaze, a spark in his eyes. This link's a weapon. We'll wield it. Thera dipped her head, flames surging. Whatever it is, I'll burn it to ash. Her tone was steel, resolute. They stepped onto the tower's balcony, desert wind whipping past, red sand glinting in the sunlight. Under the twin suns, the shadow halted, milky eyes locked on them. A low growl shook the stone, cracks spidering, underfoot. Kael swept his cybernetic arm across it, screen flickering. It's not attacking. Not yet. His voice dropped, arm buzzing through the link. Thera gripped her fists, flames roaring. What's it waiting for? Her tone was taut, coal-hot eyes pinned on the shadow. A low laugh rolled from the rift, cold, familiar, chilling the air. Heron? Or something worse? Desert wind roared across the Ember Tower's balcony, red sand glinting under the twin green suns. Kael Vance stood steady, his cybernetic arm buzzing faint, blue eyes locked on the hulking shadow drifting before the eastern rift's crack. Veyra stood beside him, orange glow surging, flames licking around her fists like a coiled beast. A low laugh echoed from the rift, cold, familiar, chilling the air to the bone. Kael raised his cybernetic arm, screen glitching hard. Heron! Or something uglier. His voice was rough, arm flaring hot through the ether link. Thera's resolve burned in his chest, a fire he couldn't shake. Thera clenched her fists, glow blazing. Whoever it is, I'll torch them to nothing. Her tone was iron, coal-hot eyes flaring. Kael's doubt, Heron's betrayal, the old blast, bled through the link, a shadow stirring her gut. Kael turned, softening. We'll face it together. This link's more than baggage. He lifted his arm, blue light merging with her orange flames. It's power, Valtheran and human, forged as one. Thera nodded, flames steadying. I see Earth through you. That stubborn grit, it's rubbed off. Her voice softened, thick with feeling. She felt Kael's past, cities in ruins, yet humans clawing back. Kael's smirk flickered, cold but real. And I see Valtheris through you? Fire that never quits. Her dad's grin under twin suns flashed through the link, a spark lighting his dark. We're tougher than what came before. The shadow loomed closer, milky eyes glowing bright. A deep growl rumbled, shaking the balcony, stone cracking beneath their boots. Kael scanned it again, screen flickering. It's not swinging yet, wants us to notice. His voice tightened, arm buzzing harder. Thera stepped up, flames surging. Notice what? The void coming back for round two? Her glow painted the shadow orange, voice sharp with defiance. Korath emerged from the flame chamber, purple skin blazing. Not the void. A warning. His voice rolled deep, cutting through the wind. The black flame lost. But they planted a seed. Kael spun, eyes narrowing. A seed? This thing? He jabbed a finger at the shadow, arm whining. They're trying to spook us. Korath nodded, purple eyes glinting. Fear's their weapon. But you've shown strength. The Council's greenlit your tech, Captain Vance. He glanced at Thera. And your fire, warrior Veyra. Thera went still, glow dimming. They took my dad. I won't let them take Valtheris. Her voice was steady, eyes locked on the shadow. Kael dipped his head, arm clenched. Heron's alive. I know him. He doesn't quit. He met Thera's gaze. Neither do we. The shadow paused, growl fading to silence. It drifted back, into the rift's crack, vanishing into the dark. But a new sound sliced through, a shrill screech, like the void's ancient call. Kael and Thera locked eyes, his cybernetic glow and her flames flaring as one. Thera tilted her head, coal-hot eyes steady. They'll come back. I'm ready. Her voice was low, fierce. Kael's strength pulsed through the link, metal that wouldn't break. Kael pulled his star chart from his coat, sketching a small star. Every fight's a step. We'll meet it head-on. His tone was rough, but his eyes sparked with hope. Thera's fire burned through him, a guiding light. They stood there, wind whipping past, red sand shimmering below. Under the twin suns, the Ember Tower rose tall, a beacon of their alliance. Korath watched, purple eyes blazing. A new light's dawning, but the dark lingers. Kael and Thera nodded, blue and orange light weaving together. From the rift, that sharp screech rang out again, cold and piercing. A small shadow slipped free, milky eyes staring straight at them. Something waited, and it was calling.